Hi, and welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 33. We're going to talk about The Werewolf versus the Vampire Women from 1971, titled La Noche de Walpurgis in Spanish, or The Night of the Walpurgis. This is kind of a sequel to either The Fury of the Wolfman or The Mark of the Wolfman, take your pick. I watched this on Tubi. I had not seen this before. Let's discuss the prominent crew and cast. The film was directed by Leon Klimovsky, written by Paul Naschy, billed as Jacinto Molina, and Hans Munkel, billed as Hank Munkel. The effects makeup was by Jose Luis Morales. Leon Klimovsky was a practicing dentist for 15 years before becoming a filmmaker. That is quite a career change. The cast includes Paul Naschy as Waldemar Daninsky, Gabby Fuchs as Elvira, Barbara Capel as Genevieve Bennett, Andre Racino as Inspector Marcel, billed as Andre Reese, Yelena Samarina as Elizabeth Daninsky, billed as Helena Samarin, Jose Marco as Pierre, and Betsabe Ruiz as Pierre's girl, billed as Betsabe Sharon. There is a lot to like here, and one really big problem. That problem, the movie is dark. There are quite a few scenes where I could not see anything that was going on. The entire screen was black, or almost entirely black. It's probably just the print that Tubi has, but it really makes certain parts hard to watch. That said, when I could see what was going on, the movie was fun. Very stylized, gothic, and atmospheric. I do recommend this movie, with the caveat that you're gonna have to guess what's going on at some times. One cool tidbit is the character Elvira was supposedly named after Naschy's real-life wife of 40 years. The character of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, won't be created for another decade and won't become internationally famous until the 80s. Let's review the synopsis. Let's start by saying Ilona has fantastic aim. She put both silver bullets inside the pentagram mark over Waldemar Daninsky's heart. Two county coroners removed the silver bullets to prove there are no such things as werewolves. Of course, Waldemar immediately revives and kills the pair on his way out the door before we hear him kill a young woman in the forest. Seriously, it was so dark I could not see a thing. In Paris, college students Elvira and Genevieve work on their final thesis. They track down the tomb of a 15th century countess, Wandessa d'Arville de Nadacy, a supposed witch and vampire, loosely based on Countess Elizabeth Bathory. The Countess's tomb is said to lie near a small village in northern France, so the girls load up their car and search for the place. Short on petrol, daylight, and directions, they accept the invitation to stay at the rustic country house of Waldemar Daninsky. Over a dinner of cold cuts and wine, Waldemar reveals he's writing a book about the history of Gothic churches and monuments. He falls mysteriously silent when Elvira mentions their hunt for Wandessa. Later, Elvira is awakened from her sleep when a strange woman sneaks into the room, cops a feel, and attempts to strangle her, and then warns her to leave before the night of the full moon. Next morning, Waldemar explains that his sister Elizabeth lost her mental stability after their father's death, but that she is harmless. Meanwhile, Genevieve explores the grounds and comes across a hut with blood on the walls and shackles hanging from the ceiling. Genevieve is attacked and partially undressed by Elizabeth. Seriously, Elizabeth needs professional help. Waldemar explains the shackles are used to hang game animals, so the girls decide to remain. Typical horror movie decision-making process. In private, Waldemar asks Elizabeth to leave the girls alone because they are his last hope. Elvira warns Genevieve not to let her soft heart get her in trouble. Armed with papers, documents, and maps, Waldemar and the girls find Wandessa's tomb. Elvira doesn't want to open it. I'm not sure why she was trying to find it then, but she doesn't want to, all of a sudden she doesn't want to open it. Genevieve does want photos. Genevieve cuts her arm, pulling the silver Mayenza cross from Wandessa's cadaver's chest. Some blood drips into Wandessa's skeletal mouth. A weird skeletal monk monster attacks Elvira in nearby church ruins. Waldemar saves her. That night, Wandessa rises from her coffin, obviously, and psychically calls Genevieve out to the garden, where she drinks Genevieve's blood. Elizabeth just watches? Wandessa leads Genevieve away and returns later for a nightcap on Elizabeth, leaving her corpse swinging on an iron gate. Genevieve, now a vampire, pops in to snack on Elvira, but Waldemar chases her away with the Mayenza cross. Valdemar and Elvira discuss Walpurgis Night, when Satan has the chance to take over the world. With Genevieve and Elizabeth out of the way, Elvira confesses her love for Valdemar, forgetting Marcel, her Parisian policeman boyfriend, and the two vow to fight Wandessa together. Valdemar takes certain precautions to ensure Elvira's safety because tonight is a full moon. Valdemar wants Elvira to take the cross and spend the night in the village, safely locked in the lodge there. The handyman, Pierre, drives Elvira to the village. Pierre carries on the creepiest one-sided conversation I have ever heard. Do not volunteer that people have accused you of murder, even if you then immediately insist that it's not true. Valdemar stakes Elizabeth's corpse before beheading and burying her. Wandessa and Genevieve try to feed on Pierre, but Elvira wards them off with the cross. The full moon rises. Valdemar turns into a werewolf and kills a camper. Elvira has a bad dream about the vampiresses killing her. Next morning, Elvira finds Valdemar wandering about in tattered clothes, so he finally tells her how he became a werewolf while exploring Tibet, and how Elizabeth would chain him to a wall during full moons. Only being stabbed in the heart with the Manza cross by someone who loves him will release him from the curse. I mean, the silver bullets did work in the last two movies. Maybe they don't have silver bullets, or maybe they don't have a gun. But first things first, they need to destroy Wandessa. While Valdemar hunts for her hiding place, Genevieve sates her thirst on Elvira. Valdemar doesn't find Wandessa, but he does run into Genevieve and destroys her, which releases Elvira and immediately heals the bite marks on her neck. Because it's another full moon tonight, Elvira places Valdemar in shackles, but he escapes just in time to save Elvira from being assaulted by Pierre, who it turns out probably is as dangerous as people claim. Next morning, while Elvira is in bed with Valdemar, her Parisian lover Marcel drives into town. He asks around about Elvira's whereabouts and hears strange stories about Valdemar Daninsky, black magic, vampires, and young girls dying. Marcel finally gets a lead from Pierre's girlfriend and decides to pay Valdemar a visit. Some random man finds Valdemar and accuses him of killing the man's wife and child. The man stabs Valdemar twice, but cannot actually hurt him. The Valdemar kills the man, who calls Valdemar a devil with his dying breath. When Marcel shows up at Valdemar's house, Elvira greets him with a less than exuberant kiss, and Marcel realizes there's something going on between Elvira and Valdemar. This guy is sharp. Marcel threatens to launch a full-scale investigation into the rumors surrounding Valdemar, so Valdemar talks Elvira into leaving with Marcel. Tonight is Walpurgis Nacht, the night when Satan rules the earth and Wandessa will have all her powers. Thinking Elvira safe, Valdemar steps up his search for Wandessa. Marcel and Elvira find Pierre's girlfriend's body. I can't remember who killed her. Wandessa captures Marcel and Elvira and holds them in her lair while she prepares to make Elvira a blood sacrifice to her lord and master Satan. Marcel is a believer now. Just as Wandessa is about to plunge the knife into Elvira, however, Valdemar appears and rescues Elvira. But the full moon is on the rise, again, and Valdemar transforms into a werewolf. As Elvira and Marcel watch, vampire and werewolf battle it out. The werewolf ultimately reduces the vampire to a maggot-covered bony skeleton. Elvira grabs the Mayenza cross and, with all the love in her heart, plunges it into Valdemar's werewolf heart. Valdemar reverts to human form. Elvira and Marcel leave the tomb with their arms around each other. Interestingly, I cannot remember a single scene showing a transformation in this movie. It may have been in one of those really dark scenes, but I think it's more likely that the filmmakers just skipped them in the interest of moving the plot along. And since the special effects techniques at this time were starting to show their age, audiences know where Werewolf is by this point. Why waste shooting time, budget, and precious runtime on a dated-looking effects shot? Just get on with the story. What lit shots we get of the makeup job look as good as usual for the series. There's also no real new werewolf lore. This continues all the previous lore from the previous Valdemar Daninsky movies. Let's talk for a second about Walpurgis Nacht. This whole plot element had me a little confused. I've said before, I'm not Catholic, so I did not have an immediate reaction to the mention of Saint Walpurgis, Saint Walpurgis, or Walpurgis Nacht. From the way the movie describes it, it's a night when Satan gains power and witches roam the earth. However, when I looked into it a little, it seems to be that the night is dedicated to actually fighting witches and fighting black magic. However, doing a little thinking about that makes some sense, right? The idea is that Walpurgis needed to oppose witches and black magic on this night because this is a night when witches and their powers were at their strongest, which that makes sense, right? You don't call firefighters if there's not a fire to fight. There is some idea that this entire folklore was developed to explain Christianity replacing older pagan religions and spiritual systems. It's pretty common knowledge that as Christianity spread throughout the world, it replaced and absorbed older pagan symbols, festivals, and celebrations, incorporating Christian symbology into them. Walpurgisnacht seems to be the festival specifically geared to this idea. The old pagans are lighting fires and calling on their pantheons. So the Christian saint has to convince them to worship the one true God. This isn't a big deal in the movie, just a passing reference. It is the Spanish title of the movie. I just found it interesting and wanted to do some research on it. So now that we've talked about the Spanish title, let's talk about the American title, right? The Werewolf versus the Vampire Women. This is the second El Hombre Lobo film where the bad guy is a gal. Not just a woman in this film, but multiple women. Wandessa is the primary villain, but Genevieve and Elizabeth both become vampires and must be killed, not saved like Elvira. To quote Ian Fleming, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action. I suspect that there is something going on here, that there's some issue with sexually provocative and promiscuous women going on. I don't know enough to know if this is Nashi's issue. I mean, he has written all of the El Hombre Lobo films. If this is a Spanish cultural issue, I do see some correlation between this and the Unseen Woods and other Spanish films. If this is just a general cultural reaction in the 60s and 70s to the women's liberation movement, or if this is a Franco pro-Catholic issue. Depending on whether this comes up or not in the next El Hombre Lobo film, I may revisit this in more detail. However, it does make it more interesting that Walpurgisnacht is named after a female saint, one dedicated to healing and protection. Valdemar is a lone werewolf who finds himself trapped between 2 pairs of women. On the one hand, we have the noble Saint Walpurga and the mortal Elvira. And on the other, we have the wicked Countess Wandessa and the mortal Genevieve. What guy wouldn't love to be the center of a lot of hot women vying for his attention? So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Next, I plan on discussing Moon of the Wolf from 1972. Keep your eye on the moon, silver bolt in the chamber, and we'll see you back here next episode. Thanks.